Welcome, everyone, to Wisdom and Wonder, where we explore ideas and stories with curiosity and an open mind. My name is Ann Jan, and today on the podcast, we have a student who has started the Black Student Union here on Redeemer campus. So welcome, Ruth. Thank you for coming on today.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, I so appreciate you being here. Can you just give us a little introduction of like who you are?
Yeah. So I'm Ruth Adovalande. I'm a second year double majoring in media and English writing. I'm also an international student. So I was born in the Republic of Benin, and then I moved to China, which is where I came from. So yeah.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
That is a very unique story. I feel like I don't know very many people that have like lived in China. So that's really cool that you have like a lot of international background.
Thank you.
So I guess to sort of get into it, you, in your email, when you reached out, you said that, like maybe just let's start at the beginning and sort of let's just go through the story of like how this idea came to be and like why you felt the need for it here at Redeemer. So kind of just give us the why.
Yeah. So the Black Student Union wasn't my idea, actually.
Okay.
It was a new transfer student called Deborah. She came to me and she was like, "Do you guys have a Black Student Union on campus?" I was like, "No, we don't." But like when she said it, I realized how much there were so many new Black students on campus. And I thought, if in my first year I had a space where I could connect with other people who like understand where I come from and who look just like me, why not start this for people who are coming later on? And I thought this would actually be a good idea. So she and I sat down and thought, okay, what was her vision when she mentioned what if we have a Black Student Union on campus? And I was willing to help her start it. So this is how we got like the whole Black Student Union and starting a club on campus for Black students. Yeah.
And so like part of what you just said, I'm just curious, like if we were like to drill down, what is it about this that you felt was like the need? Like what do you hope that this like you're a new student, and so like kind of get into that maybe a bit more for me.
I guess like growing up, especially after moving out of Benin, a lot of times it's like you find yourself being the only person in the room who looks like you. You find yourself in like predominantly white places or predominantly Asian places, and you feel very alienated. And it kind of felt the same thing coming to Redeemer. It didn't bother me as much, but then over time I realized, okay, I don't really have a connection with other people who are just like me. And sometimes it even feels like because we're such a small group, we're forced to get together in a way. But at the same time, it's like if we're a bigger group and we come together and we feel more at home and we feel more connected to each other, then it feels easier to live in a community like Redeemer where everybody is predominantly Dutch. So it's okay. So having like a Black Student Union actually, I feel, brought a lot of us closer together. And Redeemer feels like a better place to be in a way. It feels like a nicer and more enjoyable place to be. So that's why I really ran with the idea. I thought it was a great way to just come together and just feel more at home. But it was also in the sense of giving the rest of campus an opportunity to know about a different culture. Because apart from, like, when we come to school, and including international students as well, we're forced to know about Western culture, to know about your perspective of things. And nobody actually does get to hear our voices and what we know and like our perspective of things. So one goal of the Black Student Union was also open our events to the rest of campus so that people get to have an opportunity to know a bit more about, okay, what is it to be Black? What is part of Black culture beyond what we just see on our screens or that we hear around in the news? Like, what does it actually mean to be a Black person or someone from a different culture altogether? So that was mainly the direction that we were going. Yeah.
And like when you say Black culture, do you kind of mean like because I feel like sometimes like I as a person who like obviously I grew up in a really like rural area, there was like not a lot of diversity where I'm from. And so when people say like Black culture, is that like, I feel like I'm curious what you mean by that. Do you, like, if you could like elaborate, like, is it?
Yeah. So I could say Black culture has evolved a lot from Caribbean and African like roots. and now it has become like a culture of its own, but it still has a lot of African and Caribbean into it. So it has to do with food, clothing, music, but also the way we view the world is very different a lot of times. The way we talk to our parents, the way we view like destinies, and even sometimes the way we even approach God is different. So I feel like just the diversity in perspectives is what mainly like builds up Black culture in a way.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah.
That makes sense. Okay, and I guess I love my phone just decided to install updates. I was like, I won't pull out my laptop. I guess like my next question is kind of along the lines like when you came to Redeemer, you're talking about your first year. So like students, administration, like did you feel a sense of like maybe like aloneness, alienation, or was it more like overt than that? Did you feel like people didn't give you as much respect because you were Black? Like was there racism? Like
I personally didn't experience much racism here. I think I'm grateful for that. I didn't really experience that people were hostile towards me in any way. And even from faculty and staff, like you can tell that they tried their best to make this place as welcoming as possible. But the thing is, sometimes I feel like people love the idea of diversity in like what you can see, but then when it comes to hearing your perspective of things and hearing like how you view the world or your worldview, they start shutting you out because you don't necessarily think the way they do, or you don't see the world the way they do. And which I understand, like we all don't come from the same place. We all have different views of the world. But I feel like a lot of people are just not open-minded to other cultures. We just like the idea like, oh yeah, I'm friends with a Black person, but then you don't actually know who this Black person fully is because you haven't really taken your time to understand who they are. But you just take the surface level of things. So a lot of times it feels like you're not fully seen. It just feels like, okay, it's just another person. But then me being from a specific race is much more than just my looks. It has a lot to do also with how we view the world in so many different ways, and people don't have that open mind about things. Yeah.
And so in terms of like viewing the world, like what would be maybe a couple of examples of like, you know, common things that like maybe we take for granted, but that in your culture are very different? This is like a
I think some of the main things I noticed were mainly with how we all approached Christianity, especially when it comes to denominations. Before Redeemer, I had no idea that was a thing. So hearing that there's such a thing like Reformed and non-denominational, I was like, oh, I thought we were all Christians. Like it was like a math thing where like you all come to the same answer somehow. But sometimes when you talk to people and you say, for example, like, I don't know, just some of the ways, like, for example, how I would speak to God, or how language plays a role in how I view things, or just the practices that make some of the cultural practices that I have that are so different from other people, and they just feel like, okay, it's so different from mine, but I don't want to hear it. I just don't want to pay attention to it. It doesn't matter to me. But then I have to sit in a classroom where I have to know about sphere sovereignty, for example, and it's so foreign to me, but then I'm forced to learn about it because this is where I am. But then if there is like, I'm having a conversation with someone and I say, okay, I don't think sphere sovereignty is what is right because of this, this, and that, and because you think that is wrong, you completely shut me out. It makes me feel like I'm not welcome here, and I should completely alienate myself because what I think is not gonna at least be heard in any way.
Okay, so you, in your mind, there's like in Redeemer, at Redeemer, there's like the accepted narrative of like, this is what it means to be a Christian and this is what church should look like. Yeah. And if you deviate from that sort of like norm,
Yeah.
then people aren't really willing to like hear your perspective.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, I can see that. I can see that. I've had it's interesting because I feel like it depends on your prof and like maybe the students that are in your class in terms of like the differences. I had Dr. Joustra for my core for one of my core classes. But I found her to be pretty open-minded. Like I didn't find that she was like I'm teaching this from a reform perspective, but she wasn't like like I didn't find the class like specifically. Actually, I felt like the class like didn't really want to talk mostly. So like I don't know. It was like a core class. People were like, we're forced to be here. Let's get out of here as fast as possible.
Yeah.
So I didn't find like the groups like really wanted to like get into stuff. People were just kind of like here to get the grade and leave.
Yeah.
If that makes sense.
That's another thing too. The whole idea of silence, like when something happened, like not necessarily when something happens, but the whole idea of not really willing to speak up about things. For example, if there's an issue about a race or sexuality, because people are so scared of what other people would think about them, they're not willing to have those conversations. And it was the same thing even when we started. Apparently, there were a lot of people who didn't like the idea that there was a Black Student Union starting on campus.
Oh.
And nobody actually came to one of us to tell us about it. It was mainly conversations that were happening in the dark, like why are they having a Black Student Union? Why this? Why that? And it's just, why stay in the silence? Why not just come up and have those conversations that you have? Because this is an opportunity that you have to ask questions and to get to understand things from a broader perspective. But people just choose to stay in the silence, to stay in the dark, and just stay in the little bubble that they're in, basically. Yeah.
I think that like I could shed some light on why people, at least in our culture, aren't willing to talk about race specifically. And I think partially it's because like obviously as a white person, I don't have that experience. So it's like, what can I really add? Like I might have a question about it, but I don't feel like, I think there's such a, it's so political, there's such a political element to it. And in our culture, it's like, if you say something wrong and you're labeled a racist, you're canceled forever. Like no one will read your work.
Yeah.
And even if you asked a question and it just came across wrong, like what if you said something and it just came across wrong? It's like you're done. And so people are so scared that they'll like make a mistake.
Yeah.
That they can't talk about it, which is like part of the reason why I started this podcast. I was like, I might make a mistake. I don't know. I'm not perfect. I'm not Jesus. Like, you know, but I'm like, I feel like these are the kind of conversations that people need to be having, right?
Yeah.
They need to like have a place to talk about the things that are important and that matter and not be like, I'm like, sure, maybe people will listen to our talk and I'll get canceled because I said something wrong or I don't know. But a part of me is just like, well, I think it's still worth to have it because I'm like, it like allows other people to have the freedom. It's like if you see it happening, I don't think it's being modeled to people either, right? Like people are like, you know, if they're not seeing it at church, they're not seeing it in their families, where are they going to learn to do that? And then like in the broader culture, you already feel kind of weird. You're like, I'm a Christian. I might believe in traditional marriage. I might believe in, or maybe I don't, or maybe even that. Then in that case, then you're going to be alienated in your own, like, you know, like there's so many differences. So you kind of feel nervous to like talk about differences because it feels like scary.
Yeah.
I feel that sometimes too.
I understand. I totally understand that. And I think that's also a difference in cultures.
Yeah.
Like, for example, after living with Chinese people, they're not afraid of asking questions.
Okay.
They're not afraid of like understanding where you come from, why do you do this a certain way, why do you speak this certain way. Like they're not scared of asking you, why do you do the things you do? Why do you think this way?
Oh,
and
wow.
they're not afraid of showing you why they act the way they do. And I think coming from that perspective, I'm not afraid of asking questions. Like, and I have international friends, and every single day I'm learning something new through them because it's like, oh, I didn't know you saw things like this. I didn't know you do this like this. And it just, sometimes it surprises me and it takes me aback that people don't also do that. But then I also remember that we're all not the same. We all don't do things the same way. But that is also one of the reasons why we started the Black Student Union too, because we're not here to attack anyone.
Yeah.
And we're here to really hear like we're open to have your questions, to answer whatever concerns you have. And I understand that there are always like negative connotations around race, and it's so hard for people to sometimes have those like open dialogues about so many things. But one thing we really want to push is that we're really open to having dialogue with people and make them have these comfortable spaces where we can talk about anything, really, because it was never to be political or to segregate ourselves from everyone. It was just to make a space for us to be free, but also let other people know who we are, basically.
Okay, so for you, this this idea doesn't come from like, I feel that Redeemer needs to like, there's like overt racism and like we need to kind of have a space that's safe. Okay, that's good, because I do feel like some universities have kind of like, I think maybe that's part of the reason why people kind of maybe had pushed back. I don't know, it's hard to speculate what people like had issue with, I guess, if I'm just like trying to think through things. I think like because of like even you know, the controversy over like Black Lives Matter. There's like a lot of stuff about that people feel like a lot of feelings on both sides about like whether it was good, whether it went too far, what it should look like, violence and like whether or not police violence. Like there's just so many layers. And it's also like we're watching something that's happening in another country. Like we're watching the States. There's obviously violence that happens against Black people here too. It's not that it's just America's problem, but we're like watching it and kind of like talking about another country's, but that it's slightly different here too. There's like, it's a different culture here around race. And so there's so many factors that I think like are when people kind of like think, oh, what does that mean? I think people sometimes can think like, oh, this is just another like political agenda or something. I wonder if that's maybe why people thought that. I don't know though. Like, what did you kind of feel that like people were kind of worried about from what you could tell?
One of the things, like one of the comments that I heard, for example, was, why are we starting a Black Student Union? Does that mean we should have like a glasses club on campus? And I was like, if you wanted to, you can. Like it was never a thing about just us trying to be better than everyone, so we have to have a club or anything. I feel like if Asians wanted to have a club, they can. If Hispanic people wanted to have a club, they can. I just think it was like having these clubs are not ways of separating ourselves in any way. I think it's just the goal and the vision that they have for their own clubs, and ours was really giving this opportunity to campus to understand that we have this group on campus and we should acknowledge their perspective of things as well. Like we have so many worldviews and we need to all like hear them all. So I don't know, I feel like that comment came, like I felt really weird when I heard it. I was like, what do you mean the glasses? Like it was so weird to hear that. And that was the first thing that really shocked me about how people are receiving having this club on campus. Like, was it that bad of an idea? Or if it's maybe the language that we use, maybe the idea of a union makes people feel weird. I don't know.
Yeah, I do think there's like a lot of like maybe there's like some connotation around union that of like, you know, there is a political like when we think of the word union, we can attach that to a political idea, I think too. But I think also it's good that you're on here because I feel like I think people don't necessarily know, and I think people are worried about. Someone made a comment to me because I told them I was doing this, and they were like, "Oh, I think, but like, is that gonna like promote more segregation?" And I was like, well, I think like people like there's like I don't know, there's like down the street from my house there's like this, it's a community center for like Filipinos. So it's like basically it's like a celebration of their culture and like what does it mean, and like they all get together and they like have events there and things like that. And in the summer like they have this giant barbecue that's like open to the public too, like you can go and like buy a hot dog and it's like really close to my house. But my bottom line is like I think people are allowed to like have these things that they associate with their culture and like celebrate them and like have that as a club. I don't think that's like necessarily, I think that's like makes sense to me on some level. I'm like, okay, well, like what's the difference kind of like, no one's like upset with that,
Yeah. So that was also it, because what like the structure that we have is meeting as Black students once a month, and then at the end of the month or throughout the month we have like an event that's open to the rest of campus. That way it's not just us being like in our own little group, but then letting the rest of campus know that you are invited to understand us, but like to understand where we come from, to understand like what our culture is like, and to also have conversations that you want to have with us if you have questions and stuff like that. So yeah, like I remember like our very first event, people thought like the movie night was just for Black students, and I was like, no, it's actually open for everyone. Like anyone can walk in and have fun with us, and it's just a movie. Like it wasn't anything deep. Yeah. So I was just surprised about people's reactions.
Yeah, and I think that wow, we're already at we're already at 20 minutes. This is a good conversation. I think there's a lot of questions I think that maybe need to be talked about, because I think people haven't really, I don't think people feel comfortable to ask them, so then they like kind of talk among themselves about like different things that they have concerns with, you know. And then you it's like, it's as a Christian you kind of feel like a little bit in a different position too, because you're like, okay, what's the, like obviously I see like the idea that people are different, but then I think there's also the elements of like we're all like, you know, we are all Christians, and that is like this should be the strongest tie. So what does that mean? Like if we think about like the things that separate us as culture, and then we think about like the fact that we're supposed to be like, you know, family in a way, that's like in a really, those two things don't really go together. And I think people struggle with that idea of like, okay, these people are really different from me and have a totally different culture, but yet somehow we're like, you know, connected through Christ. I think is like I think it's a beautiful thing, but I think it's like a very, there's a lot to that too.
And I think even adding on to the image of family that you said, like two siblings are never identical. All siblings, like we're like what, 5 siblings? We're all very different. And I feel like it's the same thing with the body of Christ. Like we can't expect everyone to be the arm. Like their eyes, their feet, their legs, and they all play different roles. But when you bring them together, there's something beautiful that is made. And I feel like sometimes we want to give a body part to everyone, and we forget that we actually have different functions. And it's when we bring them together that we create something beautiful. So even if like for a while the arm just wants to be the arm, like it's gonna work as a whole body in the end in some ways. And I think that's something a lot of people just forget, that just because we're supposed to live in harmony doesn't mean that just because we're supposed to live in harmony, we don't want to accept differences because it's so difficult to accept them. But it's in the discomfort that you come out with like so many beautiful things. And even I don't think Christianity is supposed to be a comfortable journey. It's filled with so many things that are thrown at you, and it's up to you and the Holy Spirit to figure out what you're going to pick up from it, because you're going to receive information from so many different directions. You hear different cultures do different things differently all over the world, and you're like, oh, interesting how we all come from the same God. But then it's all those complexities that create a beautiful thing. And I feel like people on campus need to learn a bit more to be open-minded to so many different worldviews, because I know a lot of people come from just one specific background and have been closed off for a long time, but we have this opportunity to hear from people all around the world, and we don't use the opportunity well enough. And I think we should learn to really embrace everyone in some ways.
I agree. I think there's a level of like, you know, people are not uncomfortable with the differences, and and I think, you know, universities have done different things with that. Like one of the questions is like, so I saw this thing on the CBC a little while ago that like, it was like, there's like there was like a lounge for only Black students. I think both as York and I think it's called the Toronto Metropolitan University. It was formerly called Ryerson. I keep forgetting the name. I'm like, what was it called? They changed the name recently, so I'm like, but so I was like thinking about that. Like, do you think that's something that's like healthy for like a university to do? Because it's like, this is a space, like it's a physical space that's only for Black students. Like, because you know, there's different feelings about that too.
I think if we were a bigger number, probably. Like right now, we're like, what, about 20 to 30 Black students? And I feel like Redeemer is not that big enough to have like just one spot for Black people, because then it's like, okay, then we should have a spot for people with glasses. So it's like,
yeah,
I can't say for sure. I think it could be beneficial, but also it will be hard to do, considering like the campus is not that big to cater to all those needs.
Right.
So I feel like if we were like over 50 Black students, then it would be understandable to have a space like that. But considering the number that we are, I don't think it's necessary at the moment.
Okay. Yeah. But like, you're open to like something like that happening potentially in Redeemer's future if there was enough of a need for it. Okay. Yeah. And I guess like my question about that is like, I was thinking about this, and maybe this is, I don't know a lot about this topic, so it's good that you're here. Like, do you like, would that not be perceived to some degree as like segregation though? Like, I feel like because it's like we've come from a place where like at one point, at least, like there was sort of like the segregation of like white people and Black people, and now we've like been like, we're not going to do that, but now it's like we're doing it again. But like, what? So like, how would you like differentiate, or like if someone says that to you, like what's your idea about that, like in terms of difference?
I think it's always important to have like this space where you can feel at home,
right?
In a way, like every day you meet so many people, so many different faces, and at times you just want to be around people who are like brothers and sisters. And I think it is okay to be with other people that are just like you, because we all need this recharging energy in a way, like being around people who like understand you, who eat like you, who laugh like you, who understand your sense of humor. Because sometimes you're in class and they make a joke and you're the only one not laughing, like what is going on? But then you're with people who understand you, and it's like, oh, finally it's people who understand my jokes. It's and like I feel like it's necessary to have those spaces as well, because in a way it is segregation in a way, but we all need this space where we feel at home before we go out in the world to face all kinds of things that we're facing. So yeah. I
get that too, of like there's a difference between and I think like for myself, when I was like talking about that, like looking at that, I like people obviously have different ideas about a lot this topic, but I was looking at it, and one of the comments on the article, because I remember it was like, oh, isn't this like kind of reverse segregation or whatever, but I get what you're saying too, because I think there's like an element where we're all, you know, I found this even when I went, like, so my husband's Saudi Arabian, and I was in Saudi Arabia, and you're so alien. Like everyone is in a different religion. Everyone wears something different. And, you know, no one's like, people speak English, but it's not their first language. Arabic's the first language. So you go there and being like, you are like in every way different. Yeah. And it's such an interesting, like, I mean, I've been to other places in the world, but I feel like that is an extreme example where it's like, I'm Christian, and alone is just like, everyone around you is not, and probably wouldn't support you in being that, because it's a very like strictly Muslim place. And so it's like interesting, because I felt like if I had met a Canadian, I probably would have been like, hey, let's hang out for a second, like 100%, like let's just talk in English, because you also miss, like, even when I was in Italy, I remember being there for a while too, and being like, I would just want to talk, like, we were there for like, it wasn't that long, but by the end of the trip I was like, I just want to find someone who speaks English, because you just miss, like, even in your interactions, you're like, you realize how important language is in terms of like having that connection. So I can see that feeling like you want that kind of that connection as well. That makes sense to me. I guess, like, is there any, like, if you could say something to the Redeemer community, okay. If you could say something kind of to the Redeemer community about any misconceptions that you want to, is there any other like that we haven't touched upon yet that you kind of want to dispel to people, or?
Not really. I think I've mentioned the main things. It's just we're not here to fight. We're not here to make any political moves on anyone. Not at all. It's just us giving people a chance to have like open dialogues that are not. We're not here to judge anyone. We're all not perfect. We're all still learning, and this is a chance just for everyone to come together to understand each other better. And we're here vibing and just we want to have fun with people. I know sometimes it feels weird, like you're in Refresh and then it's like the table of Black people, and then we're sometimes the loudest people in Refresh, and it can be uncomfortable, but in a way, this is what makes us feel comfortable in Redeemer, when everything feels so different to us. And we never wanted to make other people uncomfortable. It was just a space for us to come together and feel free. If there's anything that needs to be spoken about, we will talk about it. And if we need to bring it up to Senate, for example, we will. But it has never occurred that something like that had to happen.
Right, yeah.
It was just a space where we come together to be ourselves, to talk about how, for example, we can organize Black History Month, for example, and then open it up to the rest of campus. Okay, we're having a comedy night. If you have never been to one, like, you get a chance to understand something that Black people do, for example. If we're watching a movie that like talks about a bit of the conflicts between Black and white in basketball, for example, this is a chance for you to come, and then we can have conversations around. But it was never a way for us to segregate ourselves or to make other people feel uncomfortable. That was never the intention.
Yeah. Totally. Yeah, and I think that's like a great. I think it sounds really fun. I was like, I haven't gone to any. I mean, I'm old, so I'm in bed. All these things like start at like 9:45, and I'm like, what? Like, I was like, this is like late for me. I'm like, I'm used to things like starting at like 7:30. I was like, this is my jam. I'm like, I'm in my 30s now. I have 3 kids. Like, I can't. Yeah. It's a bit different in my like. I'm not in my 20s anymore. I can't party like I used to. But no, they do sound, a lot of them look, and I'm looking forward to the Black History thing. Yeah. I think that could be really,
we have.
So what are you guys doing for that? I'm just like, if you want to give a little promo before we end
we're still
here.
Planning a few things, but our intention is to kind of having a month full of, well, not full, but like a month with a few events and conversations, and our Instagram page will have a lot more interactive things, like videos about like, this is a Black person you should know, and stuff like that.
Okay.
It's going to be educational, but also fun. Okay. In a way that we get to learn a bit more about Black history and like what is happening in the Black community nowadays as well. And just events, like we're planning a little 90s party, so it's open to everyone. Like, we're gonna have trivia and movies.
Oh, I feel like I would dominate the 90s trivia.
Yeah, so it's just chances for people to just come together, learn something new, but also have fun on campus. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. That sounds really fun.
Yeah.
I feel like, well, I am so grateful that you came on, and I hope I didn't say anything that's going to get me canceled.
In my perspective.
But no, I think it's a good conversation. I think like I'm glad that you guys are like trying to have those conversations and kind of opening people's mind to other cultures. I think it's an important part of like also being like the body of Christ is not just in Canada in this specific way. It's like very different in so many different parts of the world, and I think that's beautiful too. So
thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, great. Thank you, everyone, for listening to this episode of Wisdom and Wonder. If you have questions, as Ruth said, the Black Student Union is very open to having dialogue, and they have lots of events where, you can celebrate just different cultures. So, thanks again for watching.